Regret doesn't hit like thunder. It drips like water, slowly carving into stone until the weight of what you've lost becomes unbearable. That's the truth, my friends. In the beginning, when someone leaves you, it looks like they're on top of the world. They post the selfies, they laugh with friends, they carry themselves like they just broke free from a cage. And you're sitting there scrolling through your phone thinking, maybe I was the cage, maybe I wasn't enough. But let me break that lie right now. You were never the cage, you were the freedom, and it takes time for someone to realize that. If you've ever asked yourself, will they regret leaving me? Will they ever feel the weight of what they walked away from? Then stay with me, because today we're diving into why the answer is yes, and why time itself becomes your greatest ally. Before we start, hit that like button, subscribe to Stoic Station, and let's grow together. Hey folks, imagine this for a second. You buy a shiny new pair of shoes. They're exciting, they're fresh, they feel like freedom. And you toss your old shoes aside, the ones you've worn for years, the ones that carried you through rain, through long walks, through tough seasons. At first, you feel unstoppable with the new pair, but weeks later, when they start to blister your feet, when they don't quite fit like you thought they would, you suddenly remember the old pair, the comfort, the reliability, the way they molded to you over time. That's what happens in breakups. People chase the thrill of new and forget the weight of true. And let's be real, my friends, people don't walk away thinking they'll miss you. They walk away thinking you'll always be there. They assume that even if they leave, your heart will still be waiting on standby, like a Netflix account they can log back into any time. But when you go silent, when you stop explaining, when you stop chasing, you do something far more powerful than words. You let them taste absence, and absence, unlike presence, cannot be faked. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." But here's the thing. Most people don't delight in change when it costs them something real. At first, they feel relieved, but time has a way of whispering truths in the middle of the night. Suddenly, that relief feels shallow, like a sugar high that fades too fast. And regret creeps in, not as fireworks, but as shadows. She'll remember your laugh when she's sitting in silence. She'll feel the echo of your presence when the world around her feels cold. She'll wonder not about why it ended, but about who she was when you were there. The version of herself that was lighter, safer, more seen. My friends, this is where the power lies. Not in begging, not in proving, not in showing her what she lost, but in showing yourself what you deserve. Silence isn't manipulation. Silence is respect. Respect for your worth, your time, your energy. You don't lose value because someone walked away. You reveal it by not running after them. And don't think for a second that silence means you're forgotten. No, silence means you're remembered differently. At first they remember your flaws, the fights, the cracks. But as time passes, those fade like words on a fogged-up mirror. What stays are the small things, the inside jokes, the steady presence, the way your hand once felt like home. Folks, people don't regret leaving noise, they regret leaving peace. And you were the peace. So here's the eye-opening truth. They will always feel worse over time if you stay steady, if you choose dignity, if you let absence speak. Because absence has a voice stronger than any message you could ever send. And while they're out there searching for something to fill the void, you're here building, growing, becoming stronger. Stay with me, because this isn't just about them. It's about you becoming unshakable. Remember this affirmation: I am the standard. Write it in the comments right now to remind yourself and show the world you're not chasing, you're choosing. Press the like button, subscribe to Stoic Station, and let's keep walking this path together. You're not alone, you're stronger than you think, and you, my friends, are unforgettable. Number 1. The illusion of relief. The illusion of freedom is the heaviest chain. That's the truth, my friends. When they first walk away, it feels to them like they've just unlocked the door to a brighter world. They breathe in the rush of fresh air. They tell themselves they're finally free, finally unburdened, finally done with what felt heavy. And in that moment, you're left behind with a storm in your chest, wondering if you were the problem, if you held them back, if maybe you were the weight they needed to drop. But here's the lie. They weren't escaping you, they were escaping themselves. And no one can outrun themselves for long. Imagine this with me. A bird spends months trying to push through the bars of a cage, convinced that if it could just break free, the skies would solve all of its problems. The door finally opens. It flies out with confidence, wings stretched wide, heart pounding with adrenaline. But after hours of circling the vast sky, after days of hunting for food it once had easily, after nights of sitting alone without shelter, the bird remembers what it left behind. The warmth, the consistency, the safety. Freedom without grounding turns into chaos. That's what happens to them. In the beginning, they'll tell themselves they're happier. They'll even try to convince everyone around them. But inside, it's not happiness, it's distraction. And distraction always fades. This is where their illusion begins. They believe relief equals clarity. They believe that because they feel light today, they made the right choice forever. But ask yourself this, my friends, how many times have you bought something new, convinced it would make you feel unstoppable, only to realize weeks later it didn't fill the emptiness you thought it would? That's the same psychology at work here. They're trading depth for novelty. They're confusing temporary relief with permanent peace. And time has a way of exposing that difference. The fear they don't admit out loud is this. What if the relief doesn't last? What if the very freedom they're celebrating turns into emptiness? That fear hides under their smiles, beneath the Instagram posts, behind the late-night laughter with friends. They'll laugh louder than usual, post more than usual, pretend harder than usual. And you'll look at that performance and wonder if you ever mattered at all. But remember, when the performance is the loudest, the silence in their heart is the deepest. Seneca once said, "We are always in the power of things we once delighted in." Think about that. You don't break free from what once gave you comfort just by walking away. The bond doesn't snap because they spoke the word goodbye. It lingers, it haunts, and the truth is, they're not free. They're tied to the very memories they're trying to bury. Now let's break another lie. The lie that you lost. You didn't lose, my friends. You remained. You're the one still standing, still holding your dignity, still refusing to beg. They thought leaving meant winning. But here's the paradox. The one who stays steady, grounded, silent, is the one who truly wins. Because when you refuse to chase, you refuse to fuel their illusion. And without your reaction, they're left alone with their own decision. That's the weight they never expected to carry. Of course, it's not easy. In the beginning, you'll feel that pull to prove your worth, to call them, to remind them of the good. You'll want to run after the bird that flew away, shouting, "Don't you see what you're leaving behind?" But ask yourself, has chasing ever made someone stay willingly? Has proving ever built respect? No, my friends, respect comes from silence. Respect comes from letting them discover the truth without your interference. And that's why this part feels like fire. It burns to stay still. It burns to watch them pretend. But in that fire, you forge yourself. Fear tells you that silence means being forgotten. But silence is the only way you'll ever be remembered clearly. Because when the noise of conflict fades, when the fog of relief clears, what's left in their mind isn't the arguments. It's the peace you once brought. It's the version of themselves that existed in your presence. And that, my friends, doesn't disappear. It becomes irreplaceable. So rise from the fear. rise from the belief that their happiness today means your value vanished. Remember this: people can walk away from a place, but they cannot walk away from the part of themselves that was shaped there. You are not gone, you live in their memory. And as time passes, that memory won't grow weaker, it will grow louder. Let me paint it clear. They will feel worse over time, not because you wished it, not because you plotted it, but because truth has no expiration date. The freedom they celebrated will start to feel hollow. The laughter they forced will start to fade. The faces they turned to for distraction won't be enough. And in those quiet hours, when the phone doesn't buzz, when the nights feel long, they'll face the mirror. And in that mirror, they'll see not just themselves, but the absence of you. That's why you don't need to chase. That's why you don't need to fight. Time is fighting for you. Silence is fighting for you. And your dignity, that is the weapon no one can take. So, my friends, carry this with you. They didn't walk away because you weren't enough. They walked away because they believed the illusion that something else would be more. And illusions always shatter. Stand steady, hold your silence, and trust what comes next. Write this in the comments right now. I am not forgotten. Show yourself, show the world, show the ones who left that your strength speaks louder than their absence. This is your affirmation, your anchor. And stay with me, because what's coming next will reveal exactly why silence doesn't just protect you, it changes everything for them. Number 2, the endowment effect. Why memories become more powerful than reality. We don't remember days, we remember moments. Cesare Pavese wrote that decades ago, and it remains one of the truest statements about the human heart. My friends, when they first walk away from you, they believe they're walking away from an entire story that's already been closed. They tell themselves, that chapter is done, I've turned the page. But memory doesn't work like a book. Memory doesn't stay in neat lines and ordered paragraphs. Memory is a highlight reel, and what it chooses to highlight isn't logic, it's emotion. At first, they convince themselves that they remember the fights, the tension, the distance. They replay the last arguments and the harsh words because that's what fuels their sense of justification. But time has a funny way of erasing the sharp edges. The longer they're gone, the more the bad dissolves like writing on fogged glass. And what lingers, what grows louder, what takes on a life of its own, are the moments that once felt ordinary but now seem priceless. That's the endowment effect. Imagine this. You've got a beat-up coffee mug in your kitchen. It's chipped, stained, nothing special. If you asked a stranger, they'd probably say it's worth nothing. But to you, it's the mug you've held every morning for years. It's the mug you used on your first day at that job you thought you'd never get through. It's the mug that's been with you through winters and heartbreaks and mornings when you barely had the energy to get up. You wouldn't sell it for 10 times its market value. Because in your eyes, it's not just porcelain, it's memory, it's you. That's exactly what starts happening in their mind when enough time passes. At first, you're just the relationship they left. But slowly, you transform into the chipped mug, into the sweater they didn't think twice about when they tossed it aside, into the old song they never noticed until it played on a random Tuesday and suddenly left them frozen in the middle of a grocery store aisle. The ordinary becomes sacred. The moments they brushed off become the ones they can't escape. Why does this happen? Because we as humans overvalue what we've invested our emotions in. We don't look back on objects or people with spreadsheets and balance sheets. We look back with the heart. And the heart doesn't care about logic, it cares about presence. It cares about the feeling of being anchored, known, cared for. That's what they start to realize over time. My friends, they don't wake up one morning with lightning striking their conscience. Number. It builds slowly, a song here, a scent there. The memory of how your hand once fit theirs without effort, the way you always made sure the door was locked before bed, the text you sent just to say, "Drive safe." At first, these memories are background noise, but when life gets quieter, when the rush of new slows down, those small things grow into something louder than the arguments they once used to justify leaving. And here's the part that stings them the most. When they try to replicate those feelings with someone new, it doesn't land the same. They'll laugh, yes, but it won't echo the way your laughter did. They'll sit across from someone at dinner, yes, but the silence will feel heavier, less safe, more like absence than intimacy. That's when the comparison begins, not because you wanted it, not because you forced it, but because the heart naturally measures the new against the old. And every time the new comes up short, the value of what they lost increases. This is why silence is your ally. If you were to chase them, if you were to keep flooding their world with your presence, they wouldn't feel this weight. They wouldn't feel the scarcity. Because when something is always available, the mind doesn't treasure it. Think about it. When's the last time you valued the air you breathe? Not until you were gasping for it, not until the room grew tight. That's exactly what happens in their heart when you step back. You become the air they once took for granted, and absence teaches them what presence really meant. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." And over time, their mind begins to wander back, not to the worst of you, but to the best of you. Because no matter how hard they try, the brain rewrites the past, not as it was, but as it felt. And the feelings that endure are rarely the painful ones. The mind has a way of sanding down the rough edges and polishing the beautiful parts until they gleam. They'll forget the tiny irritations, but they'll remember the peace of laying their head on your chest. They'll forget the harsh words, but they'll remember the way your eyes softened when you smiled. So don't fall for the lie that your silence makes you invisible. Silence makes you unforgettable. When you step back, you're not erasing yourself. You're allowing their mind to do the work for you. You're letting the endowment effect run its course. And trust me, it will. But here's where the difficulty comes in. It's hard to trust this process. It's hard not to think, what if they forget me completely? What if they never look back? My friends, let me tell you, no one forgets the person who gave them safety. No one forgets the one who saw them at their weakest and still stayed. They may distract themselves, they may bury it deep, but memory doesn't delete. It preserves, and the longer the time, the more it amplifies. So rise above the fear. Don't cling to the idea that you need to remind them of your worth. Don't fight the urge to prove. Their own heart will do the proving for you. Every memory they carry becomes a mirror they can't escape. And in that mirror they'll see not just who you were, but who they were when you were by their side. That version of themselves, the one that was lighter, calmer, more seen, that's what they'll miss most. Here's the irony, folks. The things they overlooked when they had you are the exact things they'll cling to in your absence. The tiny moments that didn't feel special then will become sacred in hindsight. And while they're wrestling with that, you're building. You're growing. You're stepping into a version of yourself that's stronger, clearer, unshakable. That's the beauty of this truth. Their regret grows while your power rises. So don't fear the silence. Don't run from the absence. Let time do its work. Let the endowment effect whisper in their ear at night, in songs, in scents, in fleeting memories that crash like waves. And stand firm in your dignity, because you are not just a chapter in their story. You are the standard by which the rest of the story will be measured. Write this in the comments right now. I am unforgettable. Show yourself. Show the world. Show those who left that silence is not weakness. It's strength. And stay with me, because what's coming next will reveal how the very thing they once took for granted, your presence, turns into the one thing they'll spend years searching for again. Number 3. Loss, aversion, the shock of no access. We do not fear gaining little, we fear losing much. That is how the human heart works, my friends. It's not the thrill of gaining something new that shakes us to the core. It's the pain of losing what we already believed was ours. That's why the sting of loss lingers far longer than the joy of any new beginning. And when they walked away, they didn't truly believe they were losing you. No, they told themselves a comforting lie, that even if they closed the door, it would never really lock. That if they wanted to, they could always come back and you'd still be there, steady, waiting, like a lamp left on in the window. That's how most people think when they end something. They don't imagine finality. They imagine pause. They believe that no matter what, the door to your heart will remain cracked open. Why? Because you were reliable, you were present, you were consistent. And consistency, my friends, breeds the illusion of permanence. They thought you were permanent. But here's the shock that rattles them more than anything else: silence. When you go quiet, not out of spite, not as some childish game, but out of dignity, suddenly the script flips. The one thing they never expected, the one thing that feels like a punch in the gut, is the realization that the access they assumed they had is gone. And the weight of that truth doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in. At first, they might shrug. They'll tell themselves, he's just hurt. He'll text eventually. He always does. They wait a few days, a week, maybe even longer. They post something to see if you'll take the bait. But nothing comes. No likes, no comments, no check-ins. And in that stillness, something terrifying dawns on them. Maybe the door really is closed. Maybe the access is gone for good. Loss aversion is one of the most powerful forces in psychology. Researchers have shown that the sting of losing something is almost twice as powerful as the joy of gaining something of equal value. Think about that. You can win $100 and feel good, but losing $100 will torment you. The mind clings to what it once had because it hates the emptiness that loss creates. And in relationships, that emptiness isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in presence, in love, in reliability. At first, they don't feel it because they believe you're still there, even if quietly. But when you go silent, you rip away that safety net. And only then does the real weight of loss begin to press on their chest. Imagine a person who carries around a keychain filled with keys. One day they lose a key. At first, they don't think much of it. They assume they can replace it or that they'll never need it again. But then, one night, they walk up to a door they didn't expect to need. They try every key they have. None of them work. That's when panic sets in. That's when regret starts to boil. Not because they cared about the key when they lost it, but because they suddenly realized what that key truly unlocked. That's what happens with you. They didn't see your value when you were available. But when your silence makes them realize they no longer have access, the panic begins. And here's what makes it even heavier. They assumed you'd still be there because you always were. You answered their texts. You forgave their moods. You showed up when they were half in, half out. You were consistent. That consistency became their guarantee. And when someone believes you're guaranteed, they start to treat you like you're replaceable. But when the guarantee ends, when you finally cut off access, their entire foundation cracks. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Loss is nothing but change, and change is nature's delight." But the truth is, people rarely delight in the change of losing something that mattered. Instead, they fight it, deny it, grieve it. They don't delight in the realization that your presence isn't infinite. They fear it. This is why your silence is not just absence, it's revelation. It reveals the truth they never wanted to face. You were not permanent, you were a privilege, and privileges can be revoked. Now, let's break a lie that eats away at so many men after a breakup. The lie that silence means weakness. That if you don't speak, you'll be forgotten. No, my friends, silence doesn't erase you. It etches you deeper. Because when you stop speaking, when you stop being accessible, their mind does the talking for you. They start to fill in the blanks. They start to wonder where you are, what you're doing, who you're becoming. And that wondering becomes obsession. Silence forces them to imagine. And imagination, fueled by regret, is far more powerful than any words you could have sent. Think of it this way. When a musician plays a song, the notes matter. But what gives the notes their beauty? The silence between them. The pauses that create anticipation, tension, release. Without silence, music would just be noise. Without your silence, they never feel the depth of your absence. They never realize that what they lost is not replaceable background noise. It was the melody of their life. But let's be honest, it's not easy for you. It's hard not to reach out, hard not to check their page, hard not to break the silence just to feel connected. That's where your fight lies. Not in getting them back, but in holding your ground. Because every time you stay silent, every time you refuse to hand back the access they thought they'd always have, you make the truth louder. You make the loss sharper. And though it hurts now, trust me, it will hurt them later, far more than you. So don't give them the comfort of easy access. Don't allow yourself to be the just-in-case option. When you close the door with dignity, you force them to confront what they walked away from. And no distraction, no rebound, no performance can erase that ache. And here's the irony. They will never tell you this. They might never admit the regret out loud. They may even double down, pretending they're happier, freer, lighter. But deep inside, every time they reach for the access that no longer exists, they feel the sting. That sting grows, festers, deepens, until one day they're no longer celebrating what they gained, but mourning what they lost. So, my friends, carry this with you. Loss always weighs more than gain. Your silence is not punishment, it's proof of your value. By refusing to give access to someone who discarded it, you teach them a truth they cannot escape. Love is not guaranteed. And when they realize that, when they feel the permanent shock of no access, regret will settle in their bones. Write this in the comments right now. My silence is power. Show yourself. Show the world. Show the ones who thought you'd always be there that you are not an endless resource. You are a rare presence. And stay with me, because what comes next will show you the war they'll begin to fight inside their own minds, the battle between the decision they made and the love they still feel. Number 4, cognitive dissonance, the quiet conflict inside their mind. The hardest battles are not fought on the outside, but within the silence of one's own thoughts. That's exactly what happens to them, my friends. People don't fall out of love like a light switch being turned off. It's not an instant. It's not one dramatic decision that cleans the slate forever. That's a myth we create so that endings feel neat, so that heartbreak feels justified. The truth? Love fades the way the sun dips below the horizon, gradually, quietly, so slowly that you barely notice until the darkness is already there. And even then, a part of the light still lingers in the sky. When they walked away, they told themselves they were done. They rehearsed the story in their heads. They spoke it out loud to friends, maybe even to you. They wore the armor of certainty. But here's the thing. Certainty spoken doesn't mean certainty felt. A part of them stayed tethered, even when their feet carried them away. And that part of them, the piece that still remembers, still feels, still aches, that's where the real conflict begins. It's called cognitive dissonance, and it is one of the most painful states a human being can live in. It happens when what you say and what you feel don't match, when the narrative you project doesn't line up with the reality inside your chest. Outwardly they say, It's over. I don't want this anymore. I'm better off. But inwardly, when the lights go out, when no one is clapping for their bravery, when the noise of distractions dies down, their heart whispers a different story, a quieter story, a truer story. Let me paint it. Imagine a soldier standing tall in front of the world, armor gleaming, voice steady. Everyone sees the strength, the confidence. But underneath that armor, his chest is bleeding. No one notices because the steel hides it. That's them. They're bleeding behind the armor of certainty. They act confident, but every memory, every trigger, every quiet night is a reminder that their story with you is not as clean-cut as they wanted it to be. And here's what makes it worse. Your silence feeds the conflict. They expected you to argue, to chase, to prove them wrong. They needed you to break down so they could reassure themselves they made the right choice. Because if you begged, if you pleaded, if you unraveled, they could point and say, "See, that's why I left. I was right." But you didn't. You stayed steady. You honored their choice without resistance. And now the mirror you hold up in your stillness is one they cannot escape. In that mirror, they don't see someone weak or desperate. They see a man who respected himself enough to let go. And suddenly, the story they told themselves doesn't make sense anymore. Because if you were truly the problem, if you were truly the one holding them back, why aren't you crumbling without them? Why are you still standing? Why are you moving with dignity, with calm, with quiet strength? That question haunts them, my friends. That's the dissonance tearing at their chest. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And this is exactly what's happening. Their imagination tortures them more than reality. They imagine you happier without them. They imagine you building a life where their absence doesn't even matter. They imagine you moving on, not with bitterness, but with peace. And that imagination becomes unbearable because it clashes with the story they crafted to survive. The late-night thoughts become heavy. They scroll through old photos, not to relive, but to reassure themselves they made the right choice. But the more they look, the less reassurance they find. Instead, they find the quiet moments they can't replicate, the laughter on a random Tuesday, the way you knew what they needed without them saying a word, the safety of your presence when the world outside felt cold. And no matter how much they try to silence those thoughts, they return, again and again. This is the prison of cognitive dissonance. On one side, their decision, on the other, their heart, and the two refuse to align. At first, they can drown it out with distractions, friends, dates, trips, the performance of happiness, but dissonance doesn't die with distraction. It waits, it builds, it grows louder with every quiet moment. Because when the music stops and the room empties, they're left alone with themselves. And in that silence, the battle rages. Here's the lie they live with. If I just keep pretending, I'll stop feeling. But feelings don't vanish because you pretend. They wait until you're weakest, until you're most vulnerable, and then they remind you of the truth. The truth that love doesn't dissolve neatly. The truth that maybe, just maybe, they walked away not because you weren't enough, but because they were afraid of facing themselves. And that truth, my friends, is harder to live with than any breakup. Your role in this? Stillness, strength, silence. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to speak a word. Every day you remain grounded, you feed the war inside their head. Every day you stay calm, you make their story harder to believe. Because in their mind, if you're thriving, if you're steady, then maybe they left the one person who actually brought them peace. That's the thought they can't shake. That's the thought that gnaws at them until it keeps them awake at night. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." They told themselves leaving was right. They told themselves you weren't for them. But now silence forces them to confront whether that was truth or just fear. And when truth and narrative collide, pain is inevitable. Of course, it's not easy to sit with this knowledge. It's not easy to trust that while you're healing, they're struggling. But this is where your power lies. You're not responsible for their war. You're not responsible for fixing their conflict. That's theirs to carry, and trust me, they will, because the human mind cannot live in dissonance forever. Something has to give. Either they double down on denial, or they break and admit the truth. Either way, the struggle is real, and it only grows with time. So, my friends, hold fast. Don't let fear trick you into thinking silence means irrelevance. Silence means clarity. Silence means dignity. And dignity is the one thing they can't forget. They may pretend they don't see it, but deep inside they feel it. And it unsettles them more than you'll ever know. Write this in the comments right now. I am steady. Show yourself. Show the world. Show those who left that your strength is not in words, but in stillness. And stay with me, because what comes next will show you how their regret doesn't arrive like a storm. It creeps in slowly, building day by day, until the weight of what they lost becomes impossible to ignore. Number 5. Rumination and psychological entanglement. Regret doesn't rush, it builds. Regret is not a thunderclap. It is a dripping faucet, quiet, constant, inescapable. That's the reality, my friends. When they first walk away, they don't feel regret. Not right away. They feel relief, distraction, maybe even a strange kind of victory. They think the hardest part is behind them. They tell themselves they're free, that they've made the right choice, that they've stepped into a brighter tomorrow. And at first they believe that story because the noise of newness is loud. They're laughing more, posting more, surrounded by friends who applaud their decision. And in that whirlwind, they convince themselves, I'm fine. But distraction isn't healing. It's delay. It's like sweeping dirt under a rug. The mess is still there, it's just hidden for a while. And eventually, the house gets quiet. The music fades, the nights stretch long, and that's when rumination begins. Regret doesn't rush. It doesn't slam down in the first week, or even the first month. It creeps, it builds, slowly, quietly, like water carving stone. Think of it this way. Imagine someone cutting down a tree. At first, the tree still stands tall. It looks strong, unshaken. But underneath, the cut is already weakening its foundation. With time, with pressure, with the smallest push, the tree falls. That's regret. In the beginning, they stand tall, confident. But the cut, the loss of you, the absence of your presence, weakens them from within. Slowly, inevitably. And here's the trap of rumination. It doesn't ask permission. They don't get to decide when memories return. They don't get to control when their mind drifts back to you. They'll be at dinner with friends, laughing, and suddenly the way someone holds their glass reminds them of you. They'll be scrolling through their phone when a random photo flashes by, and it's you, your smile, your presence, a moment they thought they forgot. They'll hear a song in a cafe, and suddenly they're back in your car, singing along with you on a late-night drive. That's how rumination works. It's sneaky, it's persistent. It doesn't come all at once, it comes in waves. And at first, they fight it. They tell themselves, don't think about him. That was the past. Move on. They push the memory aside. But memories aren't so easily silenced. The more you resist them, the louder they become. Like trying not to think of an elephant, the very act of resistance makes it stronger. That's the war they begin to live in, the fight against their own thoughts. This is what psychologists call psychological entanglement. It's when someone tries to detach from a bond but finds themselves tied back, not by choice, but by memory. It's not about whether they want to think of you. It's about the fact that they can't stop. Because you weren't just part of their routine, you were part of their identity. And when identity is shaken, the mind clings to the familiar. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The problem for them is, they don't have power over these thoughts. They left you believing they were in control. But rumination proves otherwise, because every quiet night, every empty morning, every sudden reminder takes that control away. They realize the story they told themselves, that leaving meant peace, wasn't the whole truth. Because peace doesn't require constant distraction. And if distraction is the only thing keeping them afloat, are they really free? Now here's the lie you've probably told yourself. If they're not showing regret, they don't feel it. Wrong. Regret doesn't show itself in selfies or public posts. Regret lives in private. Regret shows up at 2 a.m. when the room is dark. Regret shows up when they scroll too far back in their photo album. Regret shows up when they see someone who resembles you and feel their chest tighten. Regret shows up in silence, when no one is there to applaud their choice. That's when it builds, quietly, invisibly. And the more they think about you, the more the cycle strengthens. Because rumination isn't passive, it rewires the mind. Each time they revisit a memory, it grows stronger, more vivid, like a trail through the woods. The more it's walked, the clearer the path becomes. And over time, the memories of you become easier to access than the new distractions they're trying to hold on to. That's when the entanglement becomes unbearable. But here's where your power lies. They can only ruminate if you remain absent. If you were to chase them, if you were to beg or plead, the cycle would break. They wouldn't have to imagine. They wouldn't have to wonder. They'd have you right there, still available. But silence forces them to sit with the unknown. Silence forces them to fill in the blanks. And the human mind hates blanks. So it fills them with what it misses most. The warmth of your presence, the steadiness of your love, the calm you brought into their life. Think about it. When was the last time you missed something that never left? You only miss what's absent. And the longer the absence, the more powerful the longing becomes. That's why scarcity creates value. That's why silence is your greatest weapon, because every day you remain steady. Every day you refuse to hand them easy access, their rumination grows heavier, until what began as a passing thought becomes a daily ache. Of course, they'll never admit this. They won't text you and say, "I can't stop thinking about you." They won't post about their regret. No, they'll keep playing their role. But inside, the grip of entanglement tightens, and that grip turns every new relationship, every new distraction, into a comparison. And you, my friends, become the standard. Not because you asked to, but because memory made it so. And that's the irony. You don't have to lift a finger. You don't have to say a word. The more you do nothing, the more powerful you become in their mind. Because absence has a way of amplifying presence, and rumination turns memories into monuments. So, my friends, don't doubt yourself when you feel forgotten. You're not forgotten. You're replayed. You're remembered. You're entangled in their thoughts in ways they'll never admit. And that regret, that slow-building ache, will only grow heavier with time. Write this in the comments right now. I am unforgettable. Show yourself. Show the world. Show those who thought they could walk away without cost that silence carries a price they cannot escape. And stay with me, because what comes next will show you why scarcity doesn't just make them miss you, it makes you irreplaceable. Number 6. Scarcity creates value. Why your absence becomes irreplaceable. Abundance breeds blindness, but scarcity sharpens sight. That, my friends, is one of the cruelest but most undeniable truths about human nature. When something is always available, when it's always within reach, we stop noticing it. We stop treasuring it. We take it for granted because our minds trick us into believing it will never leave. But the moment it's gone, the moment the abundance dries up and turns into absence, that's when we feel the weight of what we had. And in relationships, that principle cuts deeper than anywhere else. When they were with you, they had constant access to your presence. You were there when they called. You replied when they texted. You listened when they needed to vent. And you cared even when they didn't know how to return that care. Your love, your loyalty, your energy, it was abundant. And because it was abundant, they treated it like it was infinite. They believed, maybe not consciously but deep inside, that no matter what, you would always be there. But when you step back, when you choose silence, when you stop offering what once flowed so freely, something begins to shift in their mind. Scarcity. Suddenly, the very thing they assumed was guaranteed, the steady heartbeat of your presence, is no longer there. And here's the paradox. The less available you become, the more valuable you feel in their memory. Think of it this way. Imagine a world where diamonds are scattered on every street corner. They'd lose their shine. They'd be no more precious than gravel. But place that same diamond in a locked box, make it rare, make it something you can't just reach for at will, and suddenly its worth skyrockets. That's what happens to you when you pull your presence back. You go from always available to irreplaceable. And the pain for them, my friends, is that scarcity doesn't just remind them of what you were. It makes every replacement look pale in comparison. Because when you're no longer around, when your attention isn't freely given, they start to measure every new interaction against you. And no matter how hard they try, no matter how distracted they keep themselves, the scarcity makes the memories of you burn brighter. Marcus Aurelius said, "The value of a man should be seen in what he gives, not in what he is able to receive." You gave freely, you gave steadily, and in giving so consistently, you became the standard. But it's only when your giving ends, when they can no longer reach for it like water from a tap, that they realize how rare it actually was. This is why your absence becomes so powerful, because it forces them to face something they never wanted to admit. Not everyone loves like you. Not everyone listens like you. Not everyone shows up with that same presence, that same patience, that same depth. At first, they may chase novelty. They may think someone new can replace what you gave. But over time, scarcity exposes the truth. The new might bring excitement, but it won't bring the weight of history. It won't bring the calm of familiarity. It won't bring the deep-rooted connection that only grows from time and investment. And here's what gnaws at them the most. When you were there, they didn't see it. They thought they had time. They thought they had options. They thought they could always circle back if they wanted to. But when you cut off access, when your silence becomes real, they realize time doesn't run backward. The door they thought was always cracked open is now locked. And that finality, that scarcity, creates an ache they cannot escape. Imagine this. You walk past a painting in your house every day. You barely glance at it. It's just background. But then, one day, it's gone, taken off the wall. Suddenly, you notice the empty space every time you pass by. The absence of the painting screams louder than its presence ever did. That's what your absence does. It screams, it echoes, it makes them realize you weren't just background, you were the center. But here's where it becomes almost unbearable for them. Scarcity makes them crave not just you, but the version of themselves that existed with you. The version that felt lighter, safer, more understood. When you were abundant, they didn't notice how deeply you shaped their world. But when you're scarce, they realize they don't know how to return to that version of themselves without you. And that, my friends, is when regret doesn't just sting, it crushes. Now, don't misunderstand this. Your silence is not about punishing them. It's not about revenge. It's not about manipulating their emotions. It's about honoring your own worth. Because what is valuable should never be thrown at those who don't appreciate it. And the paradox is this: the moment you step back to honor yourself, you create the space for them to finally see your value clearly. Of course, it's not easy. You'll feel the urge to remind them, to show them what they lost, to put the painting back on the wall so they don't forget. But don't, because the longer the wall stays empty, the more powerfully they feel the absence. The longer the silence stretches, the heavier the scarcity becomes. And in that scarcity, you shift in their mind from the one I left to the one I can't replace. Here's the lie they told themselves: if I leave, I'll find better. But scarcity proves the opposite. Scarcity reveals that better is not guaranteed. Scarcity whispers that what they lost wasn't ordinary. And when that whisper grows into a roar, they'll realize they didn't just walk away from a person, they walked away from a once-in-a-lifetime presence. My friends, this is why you must hold steady. This is why you must resist the urge to break the silence. Because every time you hold your ground, you amplify your value. Every day you refuse to give access, you turn yourself into something rare, something precious, something unforgettable. Marcus Aurelius also said, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself." And that's your secret weapon. While they wrestle with scarcity, with the regret that builds heavier each day, you are building yourself. You're creating a life so full, so rich, that their absence doesn't matter. And that's when the power flips. Because while they feel the ache of scarcity, you feel the abundance of self. So don't fear being scarce. Don't fear being silent. Scarcity doesn't erase you. It engraves you. It makes you unforgettable. It makes you irreplaceable. And while they're out there searching, comparing, wondering, you're here, growing, rising, becoming more than you've ever been. Write this in the comments right now. I am irreplaceable. Show yourself. Show the world. Show those who underestimated you that silence doesn't make you vanish. It makes your presence echo louder than ever before. And stay with me, because what comes next will reveal how their regret doesn't just haunt them in memory. It begins to transform into a mirror that forces them to see you differently and forces them to face themselves. Number 7. The Stoic advantage: turning their regret into your power. True power is not in controlling others, it is in controlling yourself. My friends, everything we've talked about so far leads us here. The illusions of freedom, the rewriting of memories, the shock of no access, the inner war of dissonance, the slow ache of rumination, and the sting of scarcity, they all create one outcome: regret. But regret on its own doesn't matter. What matters is what you do while they wrestle with it. And this is where the Stoic advantage comes in. Because while they're lost in the storm of second thoughts, you're standing still, grounded, unshaken. That contrast doesn't just expose their regret, it turns it into your strength. Think about it. They expected you to chase, to crumble, to prove. They expected you to unravel without their presence. Why? Because that's the script most people follow. Breakups often play out like a stage play. One person leaves, the other pleads. One person acts confident, the other collapses. But you, guided by Stoic discipline, refused to play your part in their script. You didn't beg, you didn't chase, you didn't fold. You stayed silent, you respected yourself enough to walk with dignity, and in doing that, you rewrote the story entirely. And here's the thing, my friends, nothing unsettles someone more than seeing strength where they expected weakness. Nothing burns deeper than realizing the person they walked away from didn't break, didn't shatter, didn't lose themselves. You see, they thought leaving would give them power, But Stoicism flips that on its head. The moment you stop giving away your emotional control, the power shifts back to you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's what you've done. You stopped trying to control them, and you started controlling yourself. And that's why you're rising while they're sinking, because their regret, their rumination, their dissonance, that's their burden. But your silence, your discipline, your self-respect, that's your power. Imagine two houses. One is built on sand, the other is built on rock. A storm comes. The house on sand collapses. The house on rock stands tall. That's the difference between them and you. Their freedom, their distractions, their performances. It's sand. It crumbles with time. But your silence, your steadiness, your self-control, that's rock. That's why you stand tall, no matter how hard the storm rages. And when they look back, when they measure, when they regret, that image of you standing tall becomes impossible to forget. Here's the irony. You don't even have to win them back. That's not the point. The point is to win yourself back, to rebuild, to grow, to rise into a version of yourself that even you didn't know existed. The Stoic advantage isn't about revenge, it's about resurrection. You rise, not because you want them to see, but because it's who you are meant to be. And when they do see, when regret burns in their chest, that's just the echo of your strength. But let's break the lies that keep so many men chained. Lie number 1, if I don't chase, I'll lose them forever. Wrong. If you chase, you'll lose yourself. And when you lose yourself, you've already lost everything. Lie number 2. Silence means they'll forget me. Wrong again. Silence is memory's amplifier. It's what makes them replay you in their head over and over. Lie number 3. Strength means not caring. Strength means caring enough to walk away from what doesn't choose you. And that's why the Stoic advantage is so powerful. It's not coldness, it's clarity. It's not cruelty, it's courage. It's not indifference, it's independence. You're not playing games, you're protecting peace. And peace, my friends, is priceless. Now, I know the fear that creeps in during silence. I know the nights where you wonder, do they even notice I'm gone? Do they even care? And that's where your discipline matters most. Because while you sit with the ache, while you wrestle with the urge to reach out, you're building something deeper than attention. You're building character. You're teaching yourself that your value isn't tied to anyone else's recognition. And once you master that, no one, not them, not the next person, not the next storm, can take it away. Seneca said, "He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior." That's the battle you're in right now. Not the battle to conquer their heart, but the battle to conquer your own, to conquer the fear, the need, the longing. And when you win that battle, you win them too, whether they come back or not. Because in their mind, you'll forever be the one who didn't fold, the one who didn't shrink, the one who stood tall when they expected you to collapse. And here's the beautiful truth. Their regret is not your revenge. It's your reminder. A reminder that you mattered. A reminder that your love wasn't ordinary. A reminder that you are not replaceable. Let them carry that weight. Let them wrestle with their thoughts. That's their work, not yours. Your work is to rise, to build, to become. So here's where we end, my friends. Let them feel regret. Let them replay memories. Let them ache with scarcity. That's their storm. Your silence, your dignity, your discipline, that's your anchor. That's your Stoic advantage. And in the end, it's not about whether they come back. It's about you becoming unshakable, undeniable, unforgettable. So write this in the comments right now. I am unshakable. Show yourself, show the world, show those who doubted you that silence is not weakness, it's strength. That dignity is not distance, it's power. And if this message spoke to you, if it stirred something inside, press that like button, subscribe to Stoic Station, and share this with someone who needs it. Because together, we rise, not by chasing what left, but by standing steady in who we are. Stay strong, my friends. Stay steady. Stay stoic.